Whenever you sell a product, you're not only selling a product or a service, but you're selling an opportunity for a performance evaluation at the buyer at the end of the year. You're selling an opportunity for promotion. You're selling an opportunity for people to advance their career if they build business with you. Organizations don't exist. People make decisions for that. And we have to relate both in the individual side, exactly as you say, and the organizational side. And the major flaw that a lot of sellers do is that they focus a lot on the organizational side and they neglect the individual side.
Welcome back to another episode of the Sales Gravy Podcast. This is Jeb Blount. And before we get started, I want you to check out Sales Gravy University. Sales Gravy University is the place where sales professionals from all over the globe and their companies come to learn how to sell better and how to sell more. If you've never taken a course on Sales Gravy, just go to learn.salesgravy.com, learn.salesgravy.com. And when you get there, use the code free course. Pick any course you want. I know you'll love it, and I know you'll come back. Go to learn.salesgravy.com. That's learn.salesgravy.com. I've got with me today Dr. Lorenzo Bizzi, who is a professor at State Fullerton and the author of Myth versus the Science of Selling. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. I've been looking for it for a while. It's a book you want to pick up because there are a lot of myths about selling and there's a lot of science. And Dr. Bizzi does field-based research to debunk some of these myths. But Dr. Bizzi, one of the things that you talk about is buyer uncertainty, like buyers not being certain about decisions and how we can be more transparent. And it's interesting because yesterday I was having a conversation with a top executive of one of my clients. And this executive was explaining that their customers are making decisions differently than they were just 3 years ago. And he actually said the words, they're looking for certainty. And the sales professionals that are able to give them that feeling of certainty are the ones that are most likely to close the deal. And I'm wondering if you can jump into that conversation and talk a little bit about buyer certainty and how you're approaching that through your research.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Jeb. So, few words first to explain why I wrote this book. I wrote this book because exactly as you said, I found that there sometimes is a difference, a gap between what people say, what popular advice says, and what research shows. And this is exactly an example, the idea that a lot of times popular advice focuses on the outcome of sales. So you need to try to sell as much as possible. This is what we hear under the name of the selling orientation. And then there's a meta approach, which is focused on the process. Your goal is try to lower the uncertainty as much as possible for the buyer. So if you're actually focusing too much on the outcome of the sales, you might neglect this part. And you might neglect that the role is exactly that of trying to make it as easy as possible, as certain as possible, so that you lower the barriers for the buyer, and the buyer understands the real reason why the product or service that you want to sell works. One important element of the book is that there are tons of influence tactics. You can do compliments, inspiration, but in the end, the one that works the most always remains rationality, intended as displaying well the arguments and the reasons why the product or service works so that you can maximize the impact on uncertainty. In other words, look and lower the uncertainty as much as possible. And that is the way in which you're going to be able to have a strong influence on the sales conversation.
That's a great point about being able to help the buyer see things. From my standpoint, I call it business case. Like you've got to be able to build a business case. And then for sales professionals, you need to be able to do the math. When you're having a problem with something, I need to be able to get my calculator out and actually show you the math. And what I find so many times is that salespeople, they're unable to do that because they're not doing deep discovery. The discovery tends to be pretty shallow. Like they've got a set of questions they're asking that are focused primarily on them getting the outcome that they desire, which is close the business, but not necessarily built around truly understanding the metrics that matter for that particular customer or stakeholder, because you could have multiple stakeholders who have different criteria inside of an account, and then being able to tie those metrics back to measurable business outcomes. Like, and I'm not talking about your outcome, close the deal. I'm talking about an outcome for the stakeholder group. I'm wondering, like when you're teaching or where you see sales teams making mistakes, why don't salespeople and sales leaders do this more, where they're able to actually show people the true ROI of either making the decision or making no decision whatsoever?
So this is an excellent question, Jeb. I completely agree on the importance of ROI selling. I talk about it a lot on profit selling, on showing exactly how your product or service is going to have an impact on the metrics that matter for the stakeholders. This is absolutely essential. And people don't do it. The easiest answer, of course, is that it seems to be difficult. But I'm going to tell you something interesting that also I talk about in the book. A lot of times, people don't play with evidence as much as they should to build their arguments. And the reason is, and this is a little bit surprising, when you combine all data on the impact of honesty on the sales outcome, this is going to come surprising, but honesty does not have a positive impact on the sales outcome. Now, I need to explain this. Trustworthiness is the most important thing, but being honest alone is not enough to be able to reach an outcome. And this is the reason why a lot of salespeople say, well, let me exaggerate a little bit. Let me play with the numbers a little bit. Let me do this and let me do that. Because they believe that they can get out with it. And unfortunately, that's actually the truth. In the short term, honesty can actually have a negative impact, while it has a positive impact in the long term. So this is very fascinating. To be trustworthy is not enough to be honest, but it's exactly as you say. You have to be able to build a strong, compelling argument grounded on evidence that your product or service is likely to have an impact on the ROI or in the metrics of the buyers. And for many people, this is difficult. So they say, let me go to the easy way. Let me embellish a little bit the truth. Let me say a little bit of cuter numbers that hopefully is going to impress the buyer, which in the short term, it might actually work. But in the long term, of course, it doesn't.
Well, let me give you a different spin on that. So same concept, but different spin. So I agree with you. I agree that, as a salesperson, we've been saying this for generations, like your job is to sell the sizzle, right? Not what's real. Like I used to have a sales manager, your job is to sell what should be, not what is. So if I look at my product or service, I'm a marketing brochure, right? I'm selling the dream that this is going to be perfect for you. I'm not going to go, well, we're going to implement it, and 4 weeks later, there's going to be a breakdown, or you're going to have this problem, there's going to be a bug over here. Totally get that, right? So salespeople will, I think the legal term for it is puffery, right? So salespeople will continue to puff things up. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just part of the sales game, right? That's why when you go to McDonald's, they don't show you what the Big Mac really looks like when you get it through the drive-thru, right? They show you something that makes you hungry. But the difference is you can have puffery, like you can talk about things that get people excited about them. But what the stakeholder group wants to know is, do you understand me? Like, do you get me and my problems? So when we're talking about business case, we're not just saying, okay, here's the ROI. We call it business outcome selling in our space. That's a training program that we provide in this area. But you need to demonstrate to the stakeholders that you understand them, because at the core, that's what they're really looking for. And I'm going to give you a great example of this. Before I came on this podcast, I'm in a sales meeting that the decision in this meeting is going to reshape the next 5 years of my company. Like, it's a big deal. So I'm the CEO. I'm involved in it. The spend's going to be close to $1 million when we get done. It's a big deal. And I'm grilling these people. Like I'm in the middle of their world, asking them questions that they're not used to being asked. And one of their young salespeople was actually listening to me. He's on like the architect team. This is a big software purchase. And he chimes in, puts his camera on, and says, here's what I hear you saying. And I went, yeah. And he goes, well, if you want to do that, this is probably the best way of doing it. And this is what it would look like. And I was like, instantly into that kid. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. No one else here is listening to me. All you are listening to about what you want to sell. This kid's trying to listen to what I'm trying to accomplish. And even though his answer wasn't what I wanted to hear, because what I wanted to hear was this particular software is going to do all this in one bundle. And he's saying, you're going to have to go buy this in order to plug it in to make it work the way you want it to. I respected that more. And I set another meeting with him instead of killing the deal like I've done with everybody else, because this one kid actually understood me. And there were multiple stakeholders on there. So I think when I'm coaching salespeople on this, I'm like, there's two types of criteria. that people are using to evaluate where they do business with you. There's stakeholder criteria, and that stakeholder criteria can be logic, it can be reason, and it can be emotion, right? It could be professional. Hey, this is going to help me get this. And there is enterprise or evaluation criteria. So this is how the buying group or the buying committee is going to make a decision. Here's how the enterprise is saying, here's how we're going to decide. If you focus on one without the other, you're going to lose. And if you don't focus on the stakeholders and demonstrating that you get and understand them, both at the emotional and the logical level, then it's impossible to build trust. The puffery piece, I totally get. Like, I'm with you. Like, if you walk in and go, hey, it's a cool product, but it didn't always work, they're going to kick you out the door. So you got to go in and, like, you got to be charismatic and sell your product. You got to get people excited about it. But if you don't back up and demonstrate that you get people, you got a problem. And the root cause of that is nobody's asking the right questions.
That's absolutely true. And you're right. You split in two sides. There's a stakeholder side, individual side. I write in the book also that the majority of sales professionals tend to perceive that they understand the needs of the buyers. You ask them, a huge portion of them says that they understand the needs of the buyers. But then when you ask the buyers, they say, well, that's not true. And that's exactly because it's not just a company need, but it's also primarily an individual need. Whenever you sell a product, you're not only selling a product or a service, but you're selling an opportunity for a performance evaluation at the buyer at the end of the year. You're selling an opportunity for promotion. You're selling an opportunity for people to advance their career if they build business with you. Organizations don't exist. People make decisions for that. And we have to relate both in the individual side, exactly as you say, and the organizational side. And the major flaw that a lot of sellers do is that they focus a lot on the organizational side and they neglect the individual side. Another important thing I like that you said, Jeb, you talked both of the instrumental, so I really want to understand well what works, but you talked also about the emotional side. And I think that's really what's very, very important. Because you see, when you talk to someone, words can lie, but emotions don't. And if you're able to read well into the emotions of your buyers, then you will be able to adjust your behaviors and to figure out what works best. One thing interesting that I talk about in this book, for instance, a myth that exists, very popular, is the idea that empathy is important for sales. Empathy absolutely is important for sales. But what's interesting, Jeb, is that there's actually two forms of empathy. One is affective empathy, and one is cognitive empathy. Affective is actually bad, while cognitive is good. And it relates to what you were saying before. The affective empathy is basically feeling what the buyers feel, which means you're happy when they're happy, but you're also frustrated when they're frustrated. And this, as we know well from fanatical prospecting, it's not a good idea.
Yes.
Because if you get frustrated all the time you call on the phone, that is going to impair your ability to sell more. So this is bad. But the cognitive empathy is about understanding their feelings. And this is the good part that is able to have a positive impact on sales. If we understand them, if we understand their feelings, then we can adjust our sales conversation. And this will eventually result to better outcomes.
I love that. I love the way that you put that, because there's real data in science that demonstrates that over time, statistically, salespeople who are more outcome driven and less empathy driven will win at a higher rate than people who are empathy driven. Now, that begins to shift, that statistical curve begins to shift as you move up market into more enterprise level, larger accounts, where the ability to sense where stakeholders are and what your next move on the chessboard is really begins to matter. And the way that I talk about it is a dual process, right? The best salespeople have the ability to be, I love cognitive empathy. They have the ability to be empathy. In other words, empathetic. They can stand in the stakeholder's shoes in the moment and experience what they're experiencing, but at the same time, not lose sight of their destination and their outcome. So they're able to engage, for example, in a discovery meeting and not think about, oh, I got to ask this question, this question, this question. They're able to engage in a discovery meeting and treat it like it's an organic conversation, but they understand that walking out the door, they're closing for this next step, or they're closing for this, or they need to find this information. They need to drill down there. And by the way, those are the salespeople who are more likely to get below the surface and understand stakeholder criteria, because when they notice an emotional change in the stakeholder, when they see emotional nuance, rather than bouncing off of that and moving to the next question, that's where they go. They start diving deep into that.
Yes, I completely agree. And see, you also mentioned something important when it comes to understanding the needs of the buyers, and it's the ability to listen. You see, a lot of times there's a lot of advice on active listening that tells salespeople how to prepare their answers while somebody else is talking. I feel like a major problem for a lot of salespeople is they don't really listen, because when the buyer is talking, they're in their mind already preparing the answer, looking at the script, selecting, okay, what's the best script that I need to reply this? So you're not really listening. So they're not paraphrasing what the other person is. Listening is not just about responding, but it's about sensing. You sense, you paraphrase, you dig, and then understanding a problem, exactly as what you were saying, is about breaking it down, truly go to the root cause and helping the client understand the root cause. The moment in which you're just repeating what the client is saying, then you're not adding any form of insight. But if you're helping the client break down the causes of their problems and find the root, then they're going to thank you because you help them see better. So they're going to say, well, I'm going to thank you because you helped me see my problem better than I was actually seeing. So I'm grateful for that. And yes, I'm grateful for that. Then I'm more likely to continue the conversation with you.
Yeah, and you just described exactly why top performers close deals in discovery, not at the close, right? Because they're asking questions that are causing people to sit back and go, wow, I didn't think about it that way, or I wasn't looking at that problem in that manner. But it's because they have the ability to listen deeply with their eyes, their heart, their ears, right? They're paying attention to everything. And then they're asking questions around that emotional nuance. Whereas surface level salespeople are just going through the motions and asking the questions, but they're not actually paying attention to what people are saying. And some of that, I think, is just the confidence to be able to let a conversation move wherever you want it to move. And I don't know that a lot of salespeople, especially younger salespeople, feel like they have that confidence. But I give you an example of this and why it's so important. We closed a deal, a training deal, not too long ago, but I was on the discovery call because I knew one of the people that was there. And so I decided to show up with my sales team. And I asked a simple question. Hey, tell me what's going on with your sales team. That was just all I asked. And they started talking, and they talked around in circles. Like they spent 30 minutes talking through this problem, and they couldn't explain it. They couldn't come to it. And we didn't say anything. We just stayed out of the way and let them work it out. It wasn't until like the last 15 minutes of the sales call that they were able to gain that level of clarity on exactly what was wrong and exactly what they wanted. And they ended up closing the deal for us. Like we didn't really do anything. I truly asked one question, tell me what's going on with your sales team, and just got out of the way and let them do their job. And I feel like a lot of salespeople think that influence and persuasion happens when their mouth is moving versus when their ears are open. And I think this falls into one of the myths that you write about, but I don't think that they understand that when the client is convincing themselves, because like a coach or like a facilitator, you're opening them up and helping them see their problem differently. Like that's the most powerful thing that you can do to influence people. I'm just curious on your take on this whole concept of persuasion and influence.
Yes, it's beautiful that you say, I just asked a question, they started talking and talking and talking. And our goal is really, I don't like when a lot of times salespeople say, I know better what the problem is for you. And I'm going to tell you what the problem is for your company. I'm going to sell you the argument. I'm going to tell you exactly how you can improve. No, a lot of times you are guiding their arguments. You're helping them see through the problems. You let them talk and you let them explain, and you just navigate a little bit. You focus their attention on what's relevant, and you say, wait a second, you said this part that could be a little bit interesting. Can we dig a little bit more in there? So you're basically helping them navigate through the problems themselves so that they see the problem better. Also, because if it is the buyers that see the problem, then they're more likely to get engaged rather than if it's you telling them, this is what the problem is for your company and this is how I'm going to solve it. No, you have to help them see the problem. And exactly as you say, the moment in which you help them see what the problem is and they disclose it with you, that's exactly when you can establish a solid conversation, because they don't see that they're passive, but they feel heard and that they feel that it's, okay, now I understood better this. and I'm ready and willing to move on and move forward.
Then that leads us right back into, I feel like you and I are like brothers from a different mother, but it leads us right back into what you were talking about with puffery, right? So we have our marketing brochure that we can articulate, or if we listen to them, like when people are talking, they're explaining things in stories. They're not giving us a bunch of bullet points. They're talking in a nonlinear way. That's just how human beings communicate. So as they're telling you their story and you're listening and pulling it all in, like you spend, like this particular sales call, we spent, 45 minutes listening to them. And then we just wrapped it up in a bow and said, here's what we recommend. And they went, yes. But you're listening to them and they're telling you the story. The greatest story that you can tell someone is a story they just told you about themselves and the context of how you can help them solve the problem. Now, that context is your puffery, right? You can talk about how great your product is and how you can help them, but it only matters in the context of what they told you. I had a leader, this is early in my sales career, my early 20s. Her name was Mary Gardner. She said that if the buyer says it's the word of God. If you say it, it's just another salesperson telling a lie.
Yes, absolutely true. This is perfect. And it makes perfect sense. So the idea that sales professionals who have, it's okay, the puffery idea, exactly as you say, but I have a set of fixed arguments. I have benefit A, B, C, and D. I talk with the buyer. They say whatever the needs are. Then I start explaining the benefits A, B, C, and D. Forget about that. Really establish a connection, understanding when they're explaining the problems to you, and then adjust. So adjusting the sales conversation, exclusively activating the benefits that are likely to be relevant in the specific situation, and linking the context. This is it. You hear their story and you have to create a beautiful link between the benefits that you propose and the problems that they have. And if some of the benefits are not related, you should say it out loud, because that also helps establish trust. Look, we offer these benefits, but actually don't believe they apply to your situation. So solution selling, this is a word that you, Jeb, must have heard a million times. Everybody talks about solution selling, and they misinterpret solution selling, perceiving that it's about selling a bundling of product. No, it's about articulating a clear solution, linking the problem of the client to the solution that you offer, only the specific parts together. So forgetting all these other arguments that are unrelated, no, these don't matter. But if you're able to create a solid link between the specific context of the problem of the clients and some of the benefits that you offer, then the argument is compelling. Yeah. And this is where you can establish a solid conversation.
Then you're relevant. So we've been talking about consultative selling since the mid-1980s, right? So I think that's when the first consultative selling books came out. And solution selling really came into its forefront in the late 90s, particularly in the software space. And I've had this belief, and I just want to roll this off of you, but I just have this belief, as we've moved into the age of AI. AI can actually sell solutions better than you can. Because you can go into AI and say, I've got this problem, what's the solution for it? And AI will go, do this. I believe that in the age of AI, that consultative selling, or salespeople as consultants, like walking in, truly looking at the business, exactly what you said, doing what I do. I get paid to be a consultant. I'm sure as a college professor, and especially in business, you're doing consulting for companies. Like, I'm walking in and I'm listening to people. It's the greatest thing in the world to be, because I got no dog in the hunt. Like, all I got to do is just sit and listen. And then I start asking questions. And a lot of times my entire consulting is just asking questions and helping people walk into their own solution. But my job is going back to creating certainty. The reason they hire me as a consultant is they're uncertain about the things that they think that they should be doing, which in a lot of cases are the right things. They're just not sure if they can put those, like you said, the link together. So I believe that in the age of AI, that for the salespeople that are going to survive, like they're going to reach the apex, are the ones that not just do consultative selling like we wrote in books, but truly begin to see themselves as business consultants who are in it with their clients, helping those clients make moves forward or make changes in their world by helping them gain that certainty and building that level of trust that this is the one person in the world that I believe and trust can solve my problem. And I'm just curious, as you're looking at sales, looking at business, looking at AI, and I know you are, do you see it differently or the same, or do you have a take on it that you're teaching your clients?
Oh, I knew, Jeb, you would have asked me an AI question. And So this is such a fascinating theme. My thought is this one. I believe that AI is going to increase the role of salespeople instead of decreasing it. It's going to change it in the sense that now everybody can make beautiful presentations. Okay. So the arguments, the numbers, the metrics, what we discussed before, now AI can do it for you. What problem this is going to create? A trust problem. Everybody's going to see your beautiful presentation and they don't know if that's actually AI that did it or is it you that did it. And this actually raises the importance of sales professionals because now the ability to build trust and the ability to build a connection is more important when all the presentations look incredibly beautiful. And this brings back, for instance, to here, I have it with me. That's why this becomes an important book. People buy you. The sales professional becomes more relevant when the sales presentation is made by AI. Now, I don't believe anything I say. Everybody can come up with the most stellar projections, with the most stellar arguments and the most stellar numbers that you believe are going to impact my business. But I don't believe it. So the only way to establish trustworthiness lies in the sales professional. I truly believe that the more AI comes, of course, it gives you tools to make fantastic analysis, but at the same time, it makes trustworthiness more important. And this is where the salesperson, with the ability of building a connection, with the ability of going deeper and understanding the problem and crafting a solution that is specifically tailored to the needs of the client, and also the ability to read emotions, this is when it's going to be important.
As you look at myth versus science and where we are right now, and I'm in the same boat with you. I think that salespeople are more important than ever because everybody knows that everything else is faked. And people, human beings, want to deal with real. But our role as a salesperson is going to shift because a lot of the things that we thought were important aren't important anymore. And it's our ability to build relations, build trust, be good consultants, and be able to have cognitive empathy without losing sight of outcome and putting those two things together. That's going to make us better. And the salespeople who understand how to do that are going to be at the apex of selling in the future. They're going to be the people that make the most money. But I'm curious, as you look at myths in science, what are some of the myths that as we move into this new era of sales, and we're moving rapidly that direction, what are some of the myths that we need to start dropping and saying, okay, no more of this? And what are some of the skills and changes that we need to make based on science that you would recommend in order to be our very best as we go forward?
Beautiful. So there's many different arguments on what makes an effective sales professional. I talked about empathy before. I'd like to also say one of the longest standing myths that exist in sales, the extroversion myth, right? So in order to be able to sell, you have to be an extrovert. 96% of the business leaders claim that they're extroverts. And extroversion seems to be determined in 90% of the business behaviors. But when you actually look at the outcomes, you will see that extroversion has absolutely no impact on sales because there are 6 types of extroversion and only one is the one that actually matters. Assertive extroversion. What does assertive extroversion mean? So it doesn't mean to be gregarious, to be nice, to be talkative. That doesn't matter. Assertive extroversion is the only thing that matters. And what is assertive extroversion? Introverts do not talk before they have a complete thought in their minds, while extroverts start replying to your answer even before you have finished asking a question. So this is perceived as a form of hesitation, but it's not. So the real idea is that we have to find a way to understand, for example, in the interaction with the buyers, if you're hesitant, if you're an introvert in that case, that's the only time that matters. A lot of other things don't matter. Inspirational appeals, less and less they matter. The inspirational appeal, for instance, matter only if there's an established relationship with the buyer. So if you're coming with a recommendation, that's great. Otherwise, it will be seen as disingenuous. A lot of these tactics can be effective or not, depending on the context. And also compliments, saying compliments to the buyers. Does it pay off or not? It doesn't. It's a horrible thing. But it matters to ask for advice. So when you're asking for advice to a buyer, it's like you're giving an indirect compliment. All right? It's like you're saying, oh, I recognize your expertise. And in that case, it can work out. So The issue is a lot of tactics vary in their effectiveness depending on the situations, but it remains the main key point goes back to the uncertainty. The only tactic that sustainably works is to focus on rationality, decrease uncertainty, and make it easier for your buyer to understand why your product is better or not. And you can do it with different tactics. You can do it with different forms of approach that you have, but you must remain focused on the key goal. They buy because they are convinced that the benefits are going to be substantial for the company.
Yeah, I love the introvert, extrovert, and I love assertive extroverts because I'm an introvert and people don't think that I am. I'm a complete introvert. And all it is where you get your energy from. I do not get my energy from other people. I get my energy from me. So it's like, the extrovert wakes up in the morning empty and the introvert ends the day full, right? But what I always say, these are my words, but I love assertiveness. I say the most powerful emotional stance or foundation for a sales professional in an era of uncertainty is relaxed, assertive confidence. So it's the ability to, hey, we're going to get to a place. I don't know where it's going to be, but we're going to get there together. That stance. It's being able to have the confidence to ask questions and to be equal with the person that you're dealing with, but the assertiveness to keep things moving forward. I'm back to empathy and outcome, right? The purely empathetic person, rather than moving toward an outcome, feels like they're being too pushy. And that has nothing to do with introvertedness or extrovertedness. That is the empathy scale. So they're in a situation where they're thinking to myself, I don't want to ask this person that question. I don't want to poke that particular pain point, or I don't want to ask for the next step because I don't want to be too pushy. That's too empathetic. The assertive person, right? The assertive person says, hey, that was really good information. We need to explore this more. How about Thursday at 2? So they have no problem asking for what they want. Now, on the flip side of that, I'm an outcome-driven person. I am hyper assertive. So I'm going to I have no problem. I open my calendar up and go, boom, okay, we're going to meet on this date. Will that work for you? And I'm expecting you to say yes. The problem with being purely an outcome-driven salesperson, this is where this begins to hurt you, is that if you're purely outcome driven, that's when you go in and you talk about what it is that you want. You're focused only on the outcome that you want, and you don't really listen. And then you're trying to go from hello to close too fast. So people who find themselves that, less empathetic, more outcome driven, like me, I've got to be super intentional about empathy. I've got to be super intentional about reminding myself to ask the right questions, to slow down, to pay attention to what their perspective is. Whereas people who are high on the empathy scale, they got to be really, really intentional about being assertive. And those are two different places. And it doesn't mean that you can't sell on either side of that continuum. It just means that if you don't understand who you are and where you are, and I love the conversation about assertive extroverts. I love that. I've never heard anybody say that before, but man, that is powerful. You got to know who you are so that, like you said, there's different ways that you can approach things, but you're adjusting your way so that you're better connecting with those stakeholders, and you're not allowing your character or personality or communication style traits to get in the way of your buyer gaining that level of certainty. Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm surprised, by the way, Jeb, you say you're an introvert. I wouldn't have said that. But see, this is so important because, see, on the one side, introverts are better able to listen. So that's exactly what you were telling about the fact that, say, if I'm an extrovert, I can be assertive, which I lead the conversation, and that is a beautiful thing. I do not look that I'm hesitant, and it looks that I know more, and then I'm able to reduce uncertainty. That is beautiful. But then there is a risk I don't listen enough. So see, that's why it's important to find the balance exactly as you say. We have to be able to listen. If I am a pure extrovert, the problem is that I can actually be too assertive. And I lead the conversation and I forget to listen to what the client says. So in fact, excessive extroversion is actually negative. People that are too extroverts, they lead too much the conversation. Yeah, they're energized, because also another beautiful thing you said, it has nothing to deal about how much you like interacting with people or how much you're capable of interacting with people, because you're fantastic at interacting with people. And of course, you like interacting with people, but it's the extent to which it drains your energy or it makes you energized. So I always say to an extrovert, meeting someone is like drinking coffee, while to an introvert, it's like doing exercise. So we both like interacting with others, and we both like and are able to do it, but one wakes you up and one brings you down, which means that if you're able to replenish your energies, it still works fantastically well. But you need to find a balance. Both the ability of listening that comes as typical of introverts and the ability of being assertive and confident. See, the problem a lot of times of introverts is that since they think a little bit more before they talk, they don't appear confident. And that is a problem. So, am I talking to someone that is not confident? No, this is nothing to deal with confidence. So finding the perfect balance between the ability of listening to what others are saying, to understand them deeply, and also controlling the conversation and moving it forward, because that is bad as well. If you're not taking control of the conversation and showing that you're confident, then that will result in bad perceptions from the buyers, and that would not move anything forward.
Love it. What a great conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
Hey, tell our folks where they can find out more information about you.
When they can find information about me, well, I'm a professor, so I think I have a website, lorenzobizzi.com, and that's about it. Otherwise, it's just merely my book right now.
Hold that book back up again. That's Myth versus Science of Selling. Listening to this conversation, I know you're going to go buy this book because this was powerful. Dr. Bizzi knows what he's talking about, and it's Lorenzo Bizzi, Bizzi.com, to go check him out. Are you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I don't really use a lot of social media. I know I should, Jeb, but professors don't do that.
We need to load your LinkedIn up because it's a great place to be. And I got a brand new book coming out called The LinkedIn Edge. Oh, yeah. So like I'm on this mission right now to get more salespeople to dive in and use LinkedIn the right way, especially multi-threading those stakeholders and getting to understand stakeholder criteria. So, and
I need that.
Yeah, shameless book plug. That's coming out in the fall. But go get Myth versus Science of Selling by Dr. Lorenzo Bizzi. Y'all go check him out at lorenzobizzi.com. Thank you so much for joining the Sales Gravy podcast. And folks, listen, if you want to up your sales game, if you want to sell more, win more, earn more, go check out Sales Gravy University at learn.salesgravy.com, learn.salesgravy.com. And look, if you've never taken a course before on Sales Gravy, use the code free course. Take any course you want at learn.salesgravy.com. We'll see you next time on the Sales Gravy podcast. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please make sure to click like and subscribe so you never miss a single video. And if you want more sales training content, go to learn.salesgravy.com.